Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. This is Abdul Ghaffar Abbasi here. Today we will discuss the topic that is chemical bonding. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now these are the learning objectives of the topic. Number 1, we will discuss what is chemical bond and why atoms or elements form chemical bond, types of chemical bond, ion with different examples. Then we will discuss the ionic bond, the one type. Today we will discuss only the one type of the chemical bond, that will be the ionic bond, along with its examples, its formation and its properties. Now first of all, what is the chemical bond? This is the main question in the CSS Examination General Science paper, and we have taken the main topics through the item analysis of the last 5 years. So chemical bonding was also there, and this is also one of the very important topic. So what is the definition of the chemical bond? The attractive force which holds the atoms or elements together to form molecules or compound, this is called the chemical bond. Say suppose, look at here, sodium is an element and chlorine is also an element, so they join together, they form a compound. This is called the sodium chloride, NaCl. So there is a bond between sodium and chlorine, right? There is a bond between the sodium and chlorine. So this is called the chemical bond. Why they are together, why they have elements have formed the compound, this is, we can say that they have the chemical bond, they have the force of attraction. That is the reason they are combined with one another, like NaCl in the form of the compound. So this is called the chemical bond. Like look at here, another example is CO2, carbon dioxide. Carbon is another element, oxygen is also another element. Here are two oxygen gas is reacting, so both will react and they will form carbon dioxide gas, and this is a compound. So what is the idea of the chemical bond? That there is a force of attraction between the atoms or elements, and as a result they will form compound. Like another example is water and also sulfuric acid. Compounds are formed when elements are chemically combined with one another. And why they combine with one another? Because they have the chemical bond. Now let's look at the next slide, that why chemical bond is very necessary for the elements or atoms. This was also the question in the past papers. Why atoms or elements form chemical bond? There are basically two reasons for that. Number 1 is that every element tries to complete its octet. Octet means they have the 8 electrons in the outermost shell, then duplet or 2 electrons in its valence shell. Every element tries to complete its octet or duplet, right? And then the second reason is that when they complete their octet and duplet, then what will happen? They will have the noble gas or inert gas electronic configuration, and they will become inert or stable, like noble gases or zero group elements. Now look at here, this is the table related to the noble gases or zero group element of the periodic table, which is at the right side of the periodic table. 8th A group is also called as the zero group or noble gases, because their octet, their duplet or octet is complete. In their valence shell they are having 2 electrons or 8 electrons. Now look at here, helium, atomic number of the helium is 2, and these 2 are in the first shell, that is K. Maximum electrons we can fill in the K, that is 2, not more than 2. So look at here, maximum electrons in the K shell, 2, 2 and 2, right? So what is the main idea? that why they form the chemical bond to complete their octet or duplicate. 8 electrons in the last shell, they want to occupy the 8 electrons in the last shell or the 2 electrons. So look at here, in helium 2 electrons means duplicate means 2 electrons. The duplicate of the helium is completed, right? But when we go to the other elements like neon, argon and krypton, their octet is completed. They are having 8 electrons in the outermost shell. This is their outermost shell. And now look at here, neon, it has also 8 electrons. Argon, it has also 8 electrons. And krypton, it has also 8 electrons in the last shell. So that is the reason they are inert. They are not reacting. They will become independent. They will not depend like in our daily life. We are depending on our parents, but when we get the job, then what will happen? We will become independent, right? So same is the case in the elements. They try to become independent or inert by you can say that having the 8 electrons or 2 electrons in the last shell. So this concept will relate to another concept, that for how they complete their 8 electrons or valence electrons, by losing if they have more electrons, or by gaining if they have less electrons. So this is what we will discuss in the ionic bond. So I think this will be clear that why atoms or elements form the chemical bond, because they want two conditions. First, they want to complete their octet means 8 electrons, or duplicate means 2 electrons in the valence shell. Then what will happen? What is the reason they are doing so? The reason is that they want to become inert, noble, like 8th A or 0 group elements, like I have given you the examples that their octet and duplicate is complete. Now another very important is that what are the types of the chemical bond. This is a wide the topic, chemical bond or chemical bonding. There are 3 main types of chemical bond. Number one is ionic bond, which we will discuss today. Second, covalent bond, which inshallah we will discuss in upcoming video related to covalent bond. Then coordinate covalent bond, and also we will discuss the metallic bonding also. So these are basically the 3 types of the chemical bond. Now before we are going to discuss the ionic bond, there are some key terms which we must know, then we will be able to understand properly ionic bond. What do you mean by the ion? Ion is basically the charged particle. It may be positive or negative. So this is the definition of the ion, that ion is charged particle, whether it be positive or negative. Like say suppose, look at here, sodium is positive, chloride is negative. So these are, we can say that ions. Ion may be positive or negative. Now how they form, like positive or negative, is there any criteria? Yes, ions forms atoms by gaining or losing electrons. When any atom or element gains or loses the electron, then it will become positive or negative. Now how it will become positive or negative, let's look at this. They will become positive, like this one, sodium, when they lose electrons. So positively charged ions, they will lose electrons, right? And why they lose electrons? As initially I have told you that they want to complete their octet or duplicate, 8 electrons or 2 electrons, lose 1 or 2 electrons. So this is okay. I think that how they form positive ion, by losing the electrons. So definitely how they will become the negative, they will gain the electrons. Like look at here, this is the chloride ion is negatively ion, and it is formed by gaining 1 or 2 electrons. If any ion is gaining 1 electron, so there will be only 1 minus charge. If any ion is gaining 2 electrons like oxygen, so it will become minus 2. So this was the positive and negative ion. Now what are the names for the positive and negative ions? Now this is another detailed information. Ionic bonds occur between metal and non-metal. Ionic bond, it will take place between metals which are at the right side of the periodic table, and non-metals which are at the metals are at the left side of the periodic table, and non-metals are at the right side of the periodic table. Metals always, this is a very key point, that they always form positive ions. In the next slide I have told you that this is positive sodium. So sodium is metal. Metals always form positive ion. So metals like Na, they are always positive, like Na, potassium, and then calcium, this is positive too. So they always form the positive ions. And non-metals, they always form the negative ions, like chloride and oxide, and then say suppose bromide. So they are negatively charged ions. And when metals are also called as that they are electropositive in nature, means they are forming the positive ions, and non-metals, they are negative ions, and that is the reason they are also called as the electronegative in nature, and they are called as electropositive in nature. They are very important questions in the MCQs part. Now another last, that positive ions are called as the cations and negative ions are called as the anions. So they all are cations, they all are anions. We can say that these are anions and they are anions are always non-metals, these points which we have discussed, right? And then they are metals and they are called as the cations or cations, you can say. Cations have lost electrons and anions have gained electrons. This is, we can conclude this topic, that how they form, right? Now we will discuss the definition of the, now we are moving towards our topic, that is ionic bonding. What is the definition of the ionic bonding? In ionic bond, there is a complete transfer of one electron or more electrons from one atom to another atom takes place. So in ionic bonding, what will happen? There is a complete transfer of one electron from one atom to another atom, or in other words, second definition is that in ionic bond there is a strong electrostatic attraction between positive and negative ions. As I have told you that when atoms lose electron, they will become positive, and when they gain the electrons, they will become negative ions. So positive and negative, there will be strong electrostatic force of attraction between them. So that is the reason that ionic bonds in ionic compounds, they have the positive and negative attractions. That is the reason this is very they are in solid in state. In this point we will discuss in the properties of ionic bonds. So now example is that sodium needs to lose one electron to become stable, while chloride needs to gain that one electron to become stable, right? And then sodium becomes positive, chloride becomes negative due to their positive and negative, they will form the bond. Now look at here that how they form the chemical bond. Yes, now sodium, atomic number of sodium is 11, and chlorine, it has 17. Sodium, it has 2 electrons in the first shell. This is called the electronic configuration, and in the second shell it has 8 electrons, 2, 4, 6 and 8. In the last shell, sodium has only 1 electron. So look at the electronic configuration of sodium, that in the first shell it is having 2 electrons, in the second it is have 8 electrons, in the last it has only 1 electron. Now look at the chloride. Chlorine has 17, in the first 2 electrons, in the second just draw it as a cross. This is called as the dot and cross diagram. So 2, 4, 6 and 8 chlorine. Now the remaining 7 are in the last shell, 2, 4, 6 and 7. This is the electronic configuration of chlorine, that 2 in the first shell, 8 in the second and 7 in the last. So now look at here why they form chemical bond and how they become positive or negative. Sodium is having 2 in the first shell, 2 electrons in the first shell and 8 in the second shell and only 1 in the last shell. So look at here, if sodium loses that electron, then what will happen? This entire shell will be removed and sodium will have the 2 and 8 electrons, means their last valence shell contains the 8 electrons. So it will become stable, as initially I told you that why they form compound. The reason is that they try to complete their octet or duplet. Then look at here, when we go to the chlorine, so in the last shell chlorine has 7 electrons, so it will gain the 1 electron from the sodium and now it will have 2, 8 and then 8. So you can write this diagram in this way, that now the sodium will become in this way, like sodium, it will have 2 electrons in the first shell and now in the second shell it will have 2, 4, 6 and 8 electrons. So now the sodium, their octet of the sodium is complete, means sodium has lost 1 electron, so there will be positive 1 charge on the sodium. And now look at the chlorine. 2 electron in the first shell and 8 electron in the second, 2, 4, 6 and 8, and in the last 2, 4, 6, 7 and this 1 from the sodium. So the electronic configuration for the chlorine will be 2, 8 and 8. In this way we can say that both have the both have completed their octet. So now it will become negative charge. So that is the reason that there will be positive and negative attraction between the sodium and chloride. So that is the reason that it's very strong or strong bond. Ionic bond is very strong. Ionic compounds have high melting point, high boiling point, and they are solid in a state due to this oppositely charged attraction. So this was the example related to the formation of the sodium chloride ionic bond. Now look at the explanation that sodium needs to lose one electron to become stable. Chloride or chlorine needs to gain one electron to become stable, as in the diagram I have told you. Now the sodium becomes positive and chloride, now this will be chloride, it will becomes chlorine will become negative, and that will be chloride, and then they will form a bond due to their opposite charges. There will be attraction between opposite charges, and what is the force of attraction? That is the chemical bond, and this is the ionic bond, because ions are formed, positive and negative cations and anions are formed. Now the formation of the ionic bond, this is also one of the very important topic, that which elements form the ionic bond. Ionic bond is formed between, this is very important on the MCQ's point of view, that metals and non-metals. Like metals of first A group, second A group, third A group of the periodic table, and non-metals of 6A and 7th A group, they will form the ionic bond. Like sodium is the element of the first A group, that is called alkali metal in the periodic table. Then this chlorine is the member of the 7th A group of the periodic table, and that is the reason that they will form the ionic bond, that is NaCl. Now what are the different properties of the ionic bonds? Number one, as I have told you, that due to their positive and negative charge, strong attraction, they are crystalline solids at room temperature. Like NaCl, table salt, is a salt in a solid state. Then a reason for the properties is that there is a regular arrangement of the ions in the lattice structure, and ions with opposite charge are next to each other. Now look at the diagram I am showing you related to the property number one. Now look at here, they are in solid state due to the regular pattern of ions. That is the reason they are in solid state. Now they have high melting point and high boiling point. As initially I have told you that they are positive and negatively charged ions, so they must have, there is a strong electrostatic attraction between them, so that is the reason that they have the high melting point and high boiling point. Ions are attracted by a strong electrostatic force which are not easy to break. So now look at the diagram. Sodium chloride, charge positive 1 and negative 1, and what is the melting point? 801. And magnesium oxide 2852. Look at the melting and boiling point, they are very high due to their strong electrostatic force of attraction. Now we are discussing the third point, that they are soluble in water. When you dissolve them, they will be soluble in water, they will be dissolved in water. Water is a polar solvent, charges can move about in it. What do you mean by the polar solvent? Polar solvent means that is formed by the two different elements, like H2O. So what will happen? It will be, you can say that, and dissolve. Now look at the diagram how it is dissolving. Now look at here, soluble in water, that will be, water will be surrounded by the salt particle, and then they will be dissolved in it. Now the second last point is that they can conduct heat, and electricity when molten or dissolved in water. Molten means just you have to heat it, then it will be melted, so this condition is called molten. And when you dissolve in water, this will be aqueous solution, because you have dissolved in water. So why they are conductor? Because in liquid form solution, the ions are free to move. When the ions are free to move, then that is the reason they can conduct heat and electricity. Look at the diagram for this one. Look at here, their ions are free, and that is the reason they will conduct heat and electricity. Last point, they do not conduct electricity when they are solid. The charged ions are bonded together. Now look at this diagram, they are not free, they are in solid state, so they are tightly packed with one another. That is the reason they are not conducting heat and electricity. So this was the topic related to the what is the chemical bond, why chemical bond is formed, and the one type which we have discussed here, that is the ionic bond. I hope you understood this topic. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.